Hello, I'm the Game Professor, and welcome to Games as Lit 101. Let's talk about God and video games. Don't worry, I'm not going to proselytize to you or anything like that, but deities and spirituality are a common theme in video games, and it's always interesting to see how they're portrayed. In past videos, we've talked about deism in Legend of Dragoon, criticism of organized religion in Halo 2, and even how the Phoenix Wright series addresses the concept of faith, and there's a lot more to talk about regarding how video games approach these subjects, including the series we're talking about today, Dishonored. Also, quick spoiler warning, mostly for Death of the Outsider, but, incidentally some of the stuff from the previous two games as well. The Dishonored series involves a godlike figure called the Outsider, who gives unearthly powers to various people that use them to change the tide of history. He resides in the Void, a mysterious plane of existence that humanity knows little about, but that apparently contains some kind of power that the Outsider can harness into supernatural abilities for those he chooses. The Outsider is portrayed as a god, which gives the impression of a monotheistic theology, that is to say, a religious philosophy that believes in the existence of one god. And for the first two games, that reading mostly checks out alright. The Outsider comes across as not really indifferent, but perhaps unconcerned with the plots and efforts of mortals. The people he gives power to inevitably end up shaking things up one way or another, and he seems more curious about how the world will change than concerned about the ultimate fates of everyone involved. Especially considering that the player can effect very positive or very negative change to the world in the first two games, and he doesn't seem to take particular issue with either approach. He's more like a passive observer or perhaps commentator than a judge.
How you use what I have given you falls upon you, as it has to the others before you. And now I return you to your world, but know that I will be watching with great interest.
This resembles a broad theological idea called dystheism. It's the belief in a god or gods, but not necessarily that they are morally good. So there's a lot of room for variety in that definition, obviously, but it definitely includes the kinds of trickster gods that the Outsider is largely inspired by. But Dishonored, Death of the Outsider changes our perspective on a lot of these things considerably. Death of the Outsider is the third game in the Dishonored series, though it's more of a spin-off DLC turned full game kind of thing, but it's a spin-off in the Kingdom Hearts tradition where it's actually of monumental importance to the plot and world of the series. In it, you play as Billy Lurk, one of the companions to Emily Kaldwin in Dishonored 2. Or Corvo, I guess, but come on. It's Emily. Death of the Outsider reveals that the Outsider was actually created by a cult many years before the events of the games. He was a young man that they murdered in a dark ritual to join him with the Void and transform him into a godlike being with a deep connection to and control of the Void. So in the end, the theology of Dishonored isn't actually theistic at all. Rather, it posits that God, or at least the closest thing that this universe has to one, is a creation of humankind. And what's more, that the creation process included unspeakable evil things, including the murder of a child. I suppose you could still consider the Outsider to be a god, regardless of how he came to be one, in which case the monotheistic reading would still stand alright. But it is clear as of Death of the Outsider that the Outsider is not the ultimate spiritual truth of the Dishonored universe. That would be the Void. And because of that, I think it would be more accurate to say that the world of Dishonored is eatsistic. Eatsism being the belief not so much in a god as just some kind of transcendent reality, in this case, the Void. But let's not stop there. I wouldn't have made this video if all I wanted to do was slap a label on the theological framework of the Dishonored franchise. There's something that Death of the Outsider, in particular, has to say about how we, as humans, interact with religious and spiritual concepts. The question we need to ask ourselves is this: why did humans create the Outsider? What problem were they trying to solve, and why didn't this solution solve it? One of the collectible notes in the game, Hues of the Void, includes this excerpt. We lack the language to express the Void in all its complexities. We have no words for its beauty. There is the rich, velvety darkness of the depths of the ocean, the hollow hues of the sky on a starless night, the cold color when you close your eyes to moonlight, the mottled pigments of a bruise on tender skin, the sharp black at the corners of your vision as you faint from exhaustion, a crumbled anointment of old blood, your own face reflected faintly in dark glass. All throughout the series, we hear about how the Void is incomprehensible, There's something there. We can sense it. We can see it. We can even touch it, just barely, but it's not actually within our grasp. We can't truly comprehend it. It has all the knowledge and power we could want, but more importantly, more than just the thirst for power, its mere existence and incomprehensibility is daunting. It's terrifying to see that out there and know that it's there, but not be able to actually understand it. It makes us feel so small and powerless. So why the outsider? Because he puts a face onto that unknowable nothing. To quote one of the liturgies of the cult of the outsider, the chant of the eye, a voice for the silence, a face for the terror, a body for the darkness, a wound for the wanting, a knife for the knowing, a hold for the hollow, a truth for the seeker, a charge for the warden, an eye for the eyeless. They were scared of the void, and they couldn't understand it, no matter how hard they tried. So rather than trying to understand it in its fullness, they created an emissary. They tried to take that power of the void and put it all into a person that they could understand and relate to more than just that cold, vast, powerful nothing. The outsider was essentially humanity's way of trying to impose an understandable framework onto something too vast for them to comprehend, to reduce down the infinite power of the universe into something they could grasp. But in doing so, they didn't actually accomplish that goal so much as they just caused horrific suffering for a young boy and incalculably huge consequences for the entire world going forward. Thing is, this phenomenon is not unique to the Dishonored universe. I mean, the specific circumstances are, obviously, but in broader strokes, this story has played itself out countless times all across human history. Humanity has tried desperately to understand the nature of our world beyond what we can easily observe. That drive has led to religion, to science, to society, to pretty much all progress we've ever made. When things go well, we come closer to understanding the world and all its grand, beautiful mystery. But sometimes, intentionally or not, we end up taking the opposite approach. We try to fit the vast truth of the universe in a box, in a book, in a building, in a worldview, in a prejudice, in whatever we can use to make the incomprehensible truths of our existence into something we can understand. And sometimes that can be helpful. Sometimes it brings us closer to something beautiful and constructive. But when we take it too far, when we limit what we seek to what we already understand, and especially when we become willing to hurt others for the sake of this understanding, we also move further from it. We know it only within the constraints we created for it, and not for what it actually is. Ultimately, the outsider, the god of the Dishonored mythos, isn't a god at all, but a microcosm of human suffering resulting from humankind's attempts to rein in the vast mystery of the supernatural. In truth, there is no God in Dishonored, only a bunch of humans so desperate to comprehend the incomprehensible that they tried to bring it down to their level. Now this may sound like a specifically atheistic idea, like Death of the Outsider is calling out religion as a human fabrication and an ill-conceived attempt to understand something that we can't truly understand, but I don't think that's the case. Because whether you believe in God or not, this story can serve as a potent reminder of the dangers and ineffectiveness of trying to limit the truth of the universe, whatever that truth may be, down to our own constructs. Might seem kind of weird that a video game about a fictional universe with a god who turns out to not actually be a god could have something to say about the real world, but that's what makes stories so great. They don't have to be real to provide real insight into our existence.